My name is Teresa Cruz, and I was 35 the week my uncle stood in my grandmother's lawyer's office, laughed at her will, and said, "A piece of paper won't stop me. That diner is mine." He said it twice. My grandmother had been dead 4 days. We were still in funeral clothes. We were still answering people with that flat voice you get when you have not slept enough and you do not want to start crying in front of strangers. Arturo Cruz looked at the will like it was a menu item he did not like, then looked at me like I had tricked him by surviving. The part he did not see was sitting in a yellow metal tin on Evelyn Shaw's desk. Inside it was a bank video, a doctor's capacity letter, and county records that showed exactly who had been running Carmen's kitchen and exactly who had not. The no contest clause was in there too. If Arturo fought the will and lost without a real reason, he would lose the $92,000 cash gift my grandmother had left him. He heard that part and still filed suit before the week was out. If you've ever watched family smile through a lie and still call it love, tell me in the comments what you would have done. Because by the time the county finished reading the file, Arturo was about to lose the diner, the cash, and the developer deal he thought nobody knew about. I should back up one step, because the reason he thought he could talk like that was the same reason people like him always do. Arturo had spent years telling anyone who would listen that he was the one who kept the place alive. Carmen's Kitchen sat on the edge of Route 14, a 26-stool diner with 4 booths, 1 neon sign, and a parking lot that always smelled like hot oil after rain. My grandmother bought it in 1989, when she was 41 and still had a toddler at home and a loan nobody else in the family thought she could carry. She paid it off anyway. She did it with 5 a.m. Coffee, 14-hour days, and the kind of stubbornness that never made headlines but kept the lights on. By the time I was 17, I could tell when a fryer was too hot by the sound of it. I knew where she kept the sugar packets, the order pads, the vendor checks, and the little blue notebook where she wrote every repair date by hand. She taught me all of it. Arturo taught me how to hear a man talking about himself and not interrupt him. That was the first useful thing he ever gave me. He was my mother's brother, Carmen's only son, and the family's favorite excuse. If Arturo needed money, he asked loudly. If Arturo needed a place to crash, he acted like it was temporary, and then stayed just long enough to make the electricity bill strange. If Arturo needed to be seen as useful, he would spend 20 minutes under a sink tightening one bolt and talk about it for 2 years. He had not worked a real shift at the diner in 12 years. Not one breakfast rush. Not one Sunday lunch with the church crowd. Not one week of inventory when the supplier raised the meat prices and the grill cook called out sick. He came around when the talk turned to money or property or what would happen someday. That was the word he loved. Someday. Someday the diner would be his. Someday he would modernize the place. Someday he would finally handle things because, in his words, I kept this place alive when everyone else quit. He said that line so often that I could hear it before he finished. The thing is, Carmen could hear it too. People like Arturo think older women stop noticing things once they stop arguing about them. My grandmother never stopped noticing. 2 years before she died, Carmen had a small stroke that slowed her down on the stairs and made her a little tired after the lunch rush. It did not make her careless. If anything, it made her more exact. She started asking for copies of every utility bill, every renewal notice, every bank statement, every health inspection sheet. She made me scan them. She made me print them. She made me keep one set in the office drawer, one set in a box upstairs, and one set at the bank. She told me, if you keep paper in one place, you are trusting one person. If you keep it in 3 places, you are trusting the truth. That was Carmen. She did not trust speeches. She trusted backups. One of the last clear nights before the stroke slowed her down, she sat with me in the office after closing and pulled the deed folder out of the safe. She did not show it like a secret. She showed it like a tool. Arturo had been hinting for months that he should be the one to handle the place because he was the son. Carmen looked at me and said, "He thinks blood is the same as work. That is how men lose houses and call it a surprise." She had already seen him try once, years earlier, when he asked her to refinance the building so he could open a second location. He wanted her name on the loan, not his. She told him no. He did not forgive her for that. From that night on, every time he said someday, she copied one more file and put it in a different place. She also kept the old paperwork from when she first bought the diner. The first lease, the first tax bill, the first health inspection, the bank letter from 1991 that said she could keep the lot if she stayed current. She liked seeing the timeline in one place. It made the story harder for other people to rewrite. I moved into the upstairs apartment over the diner after my mother died. Carmen said she did not want to be alone at 4 a.m. when the coffee machine started hissing and the road crew showed up before sunrise. The truth was simpler. She wanted me near because she trusted me to keep the place steady. I handled the payroll, the vendor calls, the meat orders, the taxes, and the bank runs every Thursday. Arturo called that being too close to the business. Carmen called it showing up. One of those phrases meant something. The last year of her life, she started going to First State Trust with Evelyn Shaw, a lawyer she had known since before I finished high school. She never let Arturo tag along. He would have loved that. He loved to stand in a room and pretend he had been invited when he had not. Evelyn had me come once, just to drop off records. I remember the conference room because it was cold enough to make me sit up straight. Carmen wore a blue cardigan and her good reading glasses. Jonah Patel from the bank sat across from her with a tablet. Dr. Nisha Iyer had already sent over a capacity letter. There was a notary, a witness, and a stack of papers with sticky tabs on the side. Carmen signed slowly. Then she looked at Jonah and said, "Read it back to me." He did. She made him read the part about the diner. She made him read the part about the lot behind it. She made him read the part about the cash gift to Arturo. Then she made him read the no contest clause. If Arturo challenged the will and lost without probable cause, he would lose the cash gift too. She nodded once and said, "Good, he needs something to lose." I laughed then because I thought she meant it like a joke. She did not. She knew my uncle better than anyone wanted to admit. At the will reading, Evelyn did not make a speech. She did not soften anything. She just opened the packet, adjusted her glasses, and started with the inventory. The diner and the lot went to me. The old delivery van went to the restaurant. The cash gift to Arturo was $92,000. The savings account went into the estate account until taxes and final bills were settled. Then she read the clause. Any beneficiary who contests this will without probable cause shall forfeit any gift made to that beneficiary under this instrument. Evelyn read it once. Then she read it again, because Carmen had asked her to. Arturo stopped listening after the diner and the lot go to Teresa. His face changed in the exact order men like him always think nobody will notice. First blank, then red, then offended, like the dead had broken some rule by choosing differently. "That's not right," he said. Evelyn kept reading. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "She was confused," he said. "She didn't know what she was doing." Carmen had been gone 4 days, and he was already talking about her like a witness he could cross-examine. "A piece of paper won't stop me," he said, louder now. Then he pointed at me. "That diner is mine." Evelyn did not flinch. I did not speak. Arturo laughed once, hard and ugly, and said the line I heard over and over again for the next 5 months. "I kept this place alive when everyone else quit." Then he walked out before Evelyn could finish the last page. He never heard the amount of the cash gift. He never heard that Carmen had put money aside for him anyway. He never heard that if he sued, he would be the one paying for the privilege of losing. That night, the family group chat lit up with the usual version of events. Too much emotion, too little fairness. Teresa is in too deep. Carmen would never have wanted this. I muted all of it. I went upstairs, sat at the little table where I had done the books for years, and looked at the stack of yellowed receipts Carmen kept in a tin lid because she never liked trash cans for anything important. The quiet in that apartment was heavier than the funeral home. It felt like the start of something I was not going to enjoy. Evelyn called me the next morning and asked me to come by before the lunch rush. When I got there, she had the yellow tin on her desk. "Your grandmother gave this to me the week she signed," she said. "She said if Arturo behaved exactly like she expected, I was to give it to you." "Expected," I said. Evelyn smiled without humor. Carmen was not guessing. Inside the tin were 4 things. A USB drive with a handwritten label that said First State Trust. A copy of Dr. Nisha Itter's capacity letter. A folded page of handwritten notes in Carmen's exact block letters. And a business card from Jonah Patel with a second number written on the back. Carmen's note said, in plain words, that Arturo would challenge the will, that he would try to act hurt before he acted greedy, and that I was not to let his noise make me think I had done something wrong. She had written, if he contests, he loses what I left him. Do not save him from the consequences he keeps asking for. I stared at the note for a long time. Evelyn let me. Then she plugged in the USB and turned her monitor toward me. Carmen's last trip to First State Trust had been on a rainy Tuesday in October. I drove her there because her knee was stiff, and she said she did not want Arturo in the car asking questions. She wore lipstick to the bank, which meant she wanted the day to matter. She took one look at Jonah Patel and said, "If my son starts in with his usual, I want every sentence on video." Jonah laughed, then stopped when he realized she was serious. Carmen had him open the safe deposit folder, read the deed, and explain the cash gift in plain English. She made him read the no contest clause twice because she wanted to hear what would happen if Arturo did exactly what he always did when he saw a number he liked. She was not being dramatic. She was being efficient. That was the part I did not fully understand until later. Carmen was not leaving because she was scared. She was leaving because she was tired of being polite to the same selfish plan. The video was from the bank conference room. Carmen was sitting in a chair with both hands folded on the table in front of her. Her hair was done. Her cardigan was buttoned. Her voice was steady. Jonah Patel asked if she understood what she was signing. Carmen said, "I understand exactly what I own." He asked if anyone had pressured her. "No one," she said. He asked why she wanted the diner to go to me. Carmen did not hesitate. "Because Teresa shows up," she said. "Because Teresa knows the books. Because Teresa kept the place open when Arturo was busy telling people what he deserved." Then she looked right into the camera and said, "I am making this decision freely. I know what my property is. I know what my accounts are. I know what my wishes are. I am not confused." The room on the screen was silent after that. The doctor letter said the same thing in medical language. Dr. Nisha Itter had treated Carmen after the stroke and again during her final winter. The letter said Carmen understood the nature of her property, understood who her relatives were, and was capable of making a reasoned estate decision without coercion. In our world, that is not poetry. That is the part that shuts down a claim. Evelyn leaned back. "Your uncle is going to call this undue influence," she said. "He is going to say you isolated her. He is going to say she was vulnerable. He is going to say a lot of things." "I know," I said. "Then the answer is records." I looked at the note again. The diner smelled like onions and coffee when I got back. The lunch crowd was already building. The doorbell above the front door chimed twice every time it opened, and Carmen used to say that sound meant the room was still alive. I tried to go through the shift normally. I really did. But Arturo had already started his own version of the story. He called the meat supplier and said he needed to pause deliveries until the estate settled. He called the linen service and told them he was now the emergency contact. He left a voicemail for the electrician saying the office panel might need to be looked at because of ownership confusion. Every one of those calls hit my phone through the account alerts Carmen had made me set up years earlier. That was the first proof beat after the will. Not a courtroom trick. Not a lawyer's speech. Just a stack of small alerts showing a man who had not been given authority trying to act like authority had already arrived. I sent them to Evelyn. She replied with one line. Do not answer him emotionally. Answer him with paper. So I did. He came back twice that day. The first time he asked for the office key. The second time he tried the back door and acted surprised when the chain was still on it. At 2:10, he called the bank from his truck, left the speaker on, and said he was the family contact. Jonah told him there was no change on file. Archero hung up and told me I was being cruel. Then he called the linen company and said the diner was closed until further notice. The driver still showed up at 4 and asked for a signature. I signed it and told him to ignore every call that came from Archero's number. That was the practical side of it. The emotional side was worse. The regulars looked at him with that neutral face people use when they know they are watching a man overplay his hand. Nobody wanted to fight him in front of coffee cups. They just stopped listening. I pulled the POS history from the restaurant system. 312 shifts under my manager code in the last 18 months. 2 uses under Archero's code. Both in the same week he wanted to impress a contractor by printing a test receipt. I pulled the payroll ledger. I pulled the sales tax returns. I pulled the utility payments. I pulled the vendor invoices from the meat company, the dairy truck, the bakery, the coffee supplier, and the linen service. My name was on almost every signature line. Carmen's name was on the business license renewal and the main bank account. Archero's name was on one roof repair receipt from 2018 and one pickup slip for a box of buns. He had kept exactly one shelf of napkins alive. That was it. He loved saying, I kept this place alive when everyone else quit. The numbers said he had kept it alive for about 2 hours and 14 minutes, if you counted the time he once fixed a clogged drain and complained the whole time. I spent the rest of the afternoon at the counter with the ledger books open and the old blue notebook Carmen kept under the register. She had written the shifts in the same square handwriting she used for grocery lists. Friday, Teresa. Saturday, Teresa. Sunday, Carmen until 2, Teresa after that. Archero's name appeared twice in 18 months, and both times he had signed out early because the kitchen got busy and he had somewhere to be. Carmen had told me years ago that payroll is just memory with numbers on it. If the numbers do not match the memory, somebody is lying, so I matched everything. The shift log, the vendor slips, the sales tax, the bank deposits, the receipts for flour, coffee, potatoes, and the little paper packets of jam the breakfast crowd liked to steal in their purses. Everything lined up around Teresa and Carmen. Nothing lined up around Archero except his own stories. At 3:40, Darla Nguyen from the health department called to ask who had the authority on file for the next inspection window. Archero had called her office first and told them he was the interim operator. Darla already knew Carmen was gone. She also knew a transfer request had never been filed. I gave her my name, the estate lawyer's name, and the case number Evelyn had sent over. She said, "Good, keep the place open." I do not like seeing a kitchen go dark, because somebody thinks volume is paperwork. That line made me laugh once, very briefly, because it sounded like Carmen had borrowed it from the same universe. By 5 p.m., Mr. Harrow and 2 other regulars had drifted to the counter and asked if the rumor was true. I told them the diner was still open and would stay open. Archero, hearing that, muttered that I was making it harder than it had to be. Mr. Harrow looked at him over his coffee and said, "Son, I have seen that woman reconcile until after the power went out and a bus tour came in. If she says open, it is open." Archero did not like being corrected in public. He liked it even less when nobody defended him. That was when I understood something I wish I had understood sooner. Carmen had never just left me a business. She had left me a room full of proof. The books, the receipts, the calls, the inspection sheets, the bank copies, all of it had been waiting for the exact kind of man Arturo was. He walked into places assuming people would get tired of arguing. Carmen had planned for him to be wrong. The next morning, he showed up before sunrise. I was unlocking the front door when his truck pulled in. He walked straight to the counter and said, "I need the login for the bank portal." "No." He looked offended. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. The bank knows I am the family contact. The bank knows what the will says." He put a hand flat on the counter. "I kept this place alive when everyone else quit." I met his eyes and said, "Then show me one tax return with your name on it." He barked a laugh. "You don't know how business works." "I know how records work." He was still standing there when Jonah Patel called Evelyn, and because Evelyn knew better than to call without notice, she put him on speaker. "Mr. Patel," she said, "does the bank recognize Arturo Cruz as the owner or manager of Carmen's Kitchen?" There was a pause. "No," Jonah said. "We recognize the deceased account holder, the estate, and the successor named in the will. Mr. Cruz does not have authority." Arturo's face went flat. He did not like being contradicted by a voice he could not argue with in the room. By lunch, 3 regulars had heard the rumor that the diner was being paused, while the estate sorted itself out. One of them, Mr. Harrow, who had been eating eggs there twice a week for 15 years, asked Arturo if the closure meant the pie was going too. Arturo laughed like it was beneath him. "We are just handling family business." Mr. Harrow looked at me over his coffee and said, "Girl, I watched you open this place at 4:45 every Thursday for 8 years. I know who is handling business." He did not say anything after that. He did not need to. The next call came from the city zoning office. Denise Warren sounded tired in that professional way people get when they have already seen the paperwork and know the answer is going to make somebody unhappy. "Ms. Cruz, I need to ask you about a packet that came in under your grandmother's name." My stomach went cold. "What packet?" "A preliminary zoning and curb cut request for the lot behind Carmen's Kitchen. It came with a sketch for a drive-through lane, a transfer note for Sunrise Breakfast Holdings, and a signature authorization." She paused. It also included what appears to be a traced signature on the owner line. I held the phone and looked at the window toward the lot. There was a white survey stake in the dirt by the back fence. I had not put it there. Arturo had. That was the moment the story changed shape. The packet itself was sloppy. The lot sketch used an old parcel number from before the county combined the restaurant and parking lot into one tax record. The curb-cut line crossed a drainage easement that had been stamped no access in 2017. The fake owner's signature missed the loop on the C in Carmen and copied the final line too hard, like somebody tracing a name from memory without understanding the hand that wrote it. Denise Warren saw it in 20 seconds. She said the office had already called Sunrise Breakfast Holdings because the company had attached a draft lease to the packet, and the draft mentioned a closing date 12 days after the funeral. When I heard that, I felt my stomach drop all the way to the floor. Arturo had not just been hoping to sell. He had been setting a table for it. It was no longer just about a will. It was about a man trying to sell property he did not own before the body was even cold. He was not waiting for the court to decide. He had already been talking to a developer. He had already been planning a drive-through lane where Carmen used to park her own car. He had already started moving pieces around in his head, as if my grandmother's death were a closing date. If you want to see how this turns from a family argument into a public records problem, share this story and subscribe for the next reveal. After that call, Evelyn did not waste time. She pulled the original deed history from Mina. She got the sales tax filings, the business license renewals, and the bank access logs. Jonah sent over the full packet from First State Trust, not just the video, but the entry log showing who had been in the trust folder and when. Darla from Health sent the inspection sheets proving the diner license had never been transferred. I asked the meat supplier for the last 2 years of delivery slips because Archero had been telling people he handled inventory. The slips showed his name on exactly 3 pickups, all in months when Carmen was too sick to drive. There is something calming about a stack of papers when you know the room is about to try to lie to you. It is not excitement. It is just relief that the truth has a shape. Evelyn asked me to bring everything to her office. So I did. The zoning packet. The bank alerts. The POS logs. The tax returns. The handwritten note from Carmen. The voicemail Archero had left for Sunrise Breakfast Holdings. That voicemail was the part that made Evelyn sit back in her chair and stare at the ceiling for a second before she spoke. "Play it again," she said. I did. Archero's voice came through tinny and impatient. "The owner is not going to be a problem," he said. "Probate will clear this up. We can move fast once the estate opens." Then, after a pause, "If you need a signature, use the paperwork I sent. She won't be signing anything after this week." He had not meant for me to hear that. He had not meant for a city office to flag the packet. He had not meant for a developer rep to forward the voicemail when the deal started looking messy. But that is the problem with men who think a dead woman's property can be handled in private. They leave a trail. Evelyn called Jonah, then the county recorder, then Dr. Ayer's office for one more confirmation. By the time we finished, there were 3 separate official people who had each seen a different piece of the same truth. Jonah had the bank video. Dr. Ayer had the capacity letter. Mina Ortega at the county recorder's office had the chain of title, the tax history, and the old property map showing exactly when the diner lot had been combined with the main parcel. Mina also had the zoning packet Archero had filed, using a signature that did not match the file copy Carmen had on record. She was the one who called it what it was. "Attempted transfer fraud," she said. That phrase sat in the room like a hard chair. It was at that point I stopped feeling sad and started feeling precise. I had been hurt, yes. I had been tired, yes. But now I knew what the fight really was. Archero was not grieving. He was hunting for leverage. Evelyn filed the opposition. The estate lawyer for Archero, a man named Paul Dorsey who had the exhausted face of somebody billing by the minute, immediately asked for a settlement conference before the probate hearing because he could smell the problem from across town. The conference was set for Thursday at 9 a.m. in the county records annex, conference room 3C. It was supposed to be private. It was not private for long. The county had asked for the zoning office, the bank, and the health department to send someone because the diner license, the lot, and the transfer packet were all tied together. That gave us a room with 8 chairs and 8 people who could see through a story. Mina brought the old parcel map, which showed the diner lot and parking lot merged in 2007. That meant Archero's little drive-through sketch was built on a parcel he did not understand and could not divide the way he wanted. Jonah brought the full trust log. Darla brought the inspection sheets. Evelyn said the point was not to overwhelm Archero. The point was to make it impossible for him to pick one version of the story and call it enough. The night before the conference, I stayed in the diner alone after close and went through Carmen's recipe box. The cards smelled like vanilla, onion grease, and old pencil marks. On the back of one index card, she had written the bank name, the deed number, and the line, "If he makes noise, read the papers." She had known the whole thing would come down to somebody trying to talk louder than the file. I did not sleep much, not because I thought Archero might win, but because I knew exactly what kind of face he would make when the room did not give him the answer he wanted. I had seen it at 17, when he wanted money for a truck. I had seen it at 26, when he asked Carmen to refinance the building. It was the same face every time, the face of a man who thinks the truth is a negotiation. By morning I was tired, but I was not shaky. Those are not the same thing. I slept badly the night before. Not because I thought Archero would win. Because I knew he would try one more time to talk his way around the paper. The next morning, I wore the gray jacket Carmen used to wear when she needed to look like she was not impressed. Evelyn saw me in the hall and nodded once. "No speeches," she said. "I know. Let the records do the work." The room at the annex had a long gray table, a screen on one wall, and a pitcher of water that nobody touched. Denise Warren from zoning sat to my right. Jonah Patel from First State Trust sat across from me with a laptop and a stack of certified copies. Mina Ortega was there with a binder so thick it bent the table edge. Darla Nguyen from the health department had a folder with inspection stamps on the tab. Paul Dorsey sat with Archero. Paul looked like a man who had already told his client the bad news and was waiting for him to accept it. Archero, on the other hand, looked angry that the room existed. He kept saying the same thing under his breath. "I kept this place alive when everyone else quit." He said it to Paul. He said it to the mediator. He said it to me without looking directly at me. The mediator was Judge Thomas Keene, retired, with a voice so even it made other people sound dishonest by comparison. "Mr. Cruz," he said, "we are here to see whether there is any real basis for your challenge to the will and whether the related transfer filings should stand." Archero spread his hands like he was the injured party. "There is no way my mother would have cut me out like this. Teresa had her in her pocket. She isolated her. She talked her into it." Judge Keene looked at Evelyn. Evelyn did not move. She just slid the first certified copy onto the table. The will. The signature page. The no contest clause. The witness affidavits. Jonah opened the laptop and played the bank video. Carmen appeared on the screen, shoulders square, voice steady, saying she knew what she owned and who she wanted to leave it to. Archero stared at the monitor with his jaw locked tight. He had not expected to see her alive in a room he thought he controlled. When the video ended, the room stayed quiet for 3 whole seconds. Then Paul Dorsey asked, very carefully, whether the bank had any concern about capacity. Jonah answered no. Paul asked whether Dr. Ayer's letter was attached. Evelyn put the letter on the table and said the doctor had treated Carmen before and after the stroke, had met with her during the final winter, and had no doubt about her ability to make decisions. Judge Keene read the letter twice. Then Mina Ortega opened the county folder. She laid out the chain of title. She laid out the tax payments. She laid out the business license history, showing Carmen as owner, me as operator, and nobody else with authority to move the lot or the diner into a different name. Then she put the zoning packet on top. This transfer authorization was filed 6 days before the funeral, she said. The signature does not match the file copy on record. Archero leaned forward. That is ridiculous. My mother knew what she was doing. I was helping her prepare. Denise Warren from zoning looked at him over her glasses. Mr. Cruz, your packet asked for a curb cut permit and a drive-through lane for a property you do not own. Your contact email belongs to Sunrise Breakfast Holdings. Archero's mouth tightened. Evelyn did not let the silence last. She clicked to the next item on the screen. The voicemail. Archero's voice filled the room. Probate will clear this up. We can move fast once the estate opens. Then, if you need a signature, use the paperwork I sent. The room went still. Paul Dorsey shut his eyes for half a second, which is lawyer language for I need a different week. Archero turned to him. That was about repairs. Denise made a sound that was almost a laugh. Repairs do not require a drive-through lane. Darla Nguyen from Health had been quiet until then. She opened her folder and said, And any transfer of the diner license would require a new owner application and a reinspection. None was filed. Mr. Cruz did not have authority to request either. Arturo sat back. That was the first time I saw fear on his face. Not the fear of losing an argument. The fear of realizing the room had already passed him. Then he did what men like him always do when the paper starts closing in. He went back to the one sentence that had been working for him in the family for years. I kept this place alive when everyone else quit. I did not answer. Evelyn did. She slid the POS summary toward Judge Keene. Teresa Cruz has manager codes for 312 shifts in the last 18 months. Arturo Cruz has 2. One was a test receipt. One was a pickup slip for buns. The payroll, taxes, utilities, and vendor payments all ran through Carmen's system and Teresa's operator access. The public record does not support his claim. Judge Keene looked at the paper, then at Arturo. Mr. Cruz, what years did your name appear on the business tax returns? Arturo blinked. I don't know offhand. Then answer after reviewing the file, the judge said. Arturo could not. Because the answer was none. Not one. The room went quieter after that. Evelyn put the final page down. We also have evidence that Mr. Cruz attempted to move the lot through a third-party developer before the will was even read. That is not a title issue. That is a motive issue. She nodded toward me. I handed her the second printout from Sunrise Breakfast Holdings. It was an email chain. It had Arturo's name on it. It had the developer's questions about closing timing. It had the line that made the whole room understand what he had been doing. Do you expect to control the property after probate? Arturo tried to say the email was taken out of context. But context is a funny thing when the whole chain of messages is sitting in front of everyone. The developer representative, Grant Pike, had been asked to attend because his company had already been tentatively tied to the lot. He looked like a man who wanted to leave through a wall. For what it's worth, he said, staring at the table, we would not have advanced if we knew the title was disputed and the transfer packet was not authorized. That was the visible consequence right there. Not a rumor. Not a family fight. A developer pulling back in real time because the county had caught the paperwork before the land changed hands. Judge Keene folded his hands. Mr. Cruz, he said, do you have any probable cause for the contest? Arturo looked from the bank video to the county packet to the POS logs and back again. He had none. He had noise. He had pride. He had a story he had been telling himself for years. He did not have evidence. I was there, he said, and his voice did not have the certainty it had at the will reading. I was there when it mattered. Mina Ortega spoke before anyone else could. Your own tax filings say otherwise. That was the end of his line. Judge Keene took off his glasses and set them down. The will challenge lacks probable cause. The no contest clause is triggered. Arturo's head came up. What? Your $92,000 legacy is forfeited, the judge said. He blinked like he had not heard the number right. It took a second for the room to understand what had just happened. The gift Carmen had left him had not vanished. He had thrown it away trying to take more. Arturo pushed his chair back, so hard it squealed against the floor. No, that is not how this works. It is exactly how this works, Evelyn said. He turned on her. You people can't do this to me. No one did it to you, Jonah said quietly from the other side of the table. Your mother planned for this. That landed harder than anything else in the room. Because it meant Carmen had known him well enough to leave him a way out, and he had still chosen the hole. The mediator didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He read the summary order into the record, one line at a time. The will stands. The diner and lot remain with Teresa Cruz. The zoning packet is void. The transfer authorization is not accepted. The attempted developer deal is withdrawn. The matter is referred for review because the signature on the packet appears forged. Archero sat there while each line landed. Then his face changed. The anger gave way to that ugly, small look people get when they realize a room full of witnesses is hearing the truth version of the story, and it is not theirs. He stood up. She would never do this to me. I finally looked at him. She did not do it to you, I said. She did it for herself. You just kept walking toward the trap. He opened his mouth to answer and found nothing worth saying. Paul Dorsey touched his sleeve and told him to sit down. Archero did not sit. He walked out with his jaw clenched and his file folder under his arm. He looked smaller in the hallway than he had in the attorney's office. That may be the closest thing to peace I got that morning. The county moved fast after that. The recorder flagged the filing for fraud review. The health department put a hold on any transfer until the licensed operator changed over properly. The bank froze the account authorization changes Archero had tried to push through. Sunrise Breakfast Holdings formally withdrew within 24 hours. And because Archero had chosen to challenge the will without probable cause, the no contest clause did exactly what Carmen had built it to do. He lost the $92,000. He also had to pay his own lawyer. And because he had already spent money on the developer packet, the survey sketch, and the filing fees, the whole attempt left him worse off than if he had done nothing at all. That is what greed looks like when it gets a receipt. I went back to the diner that afternoon with Evelyn and Jonah to change the business records over cleanly. The lock on the office had already been changed. The bank had already updated the successor contact. The county had already stamped the operator transfer. The practical receipt was a folder of records with my name on the license, the deed, the tax account, and the renewal forms. The emotional receipt was Carmen's apron. It was still hanging on the hook by the prep counter. Blue cloth. One missing button. My grandmother had worn it for 20 years and insisted it stayed there because, in her words, a kitchen needs a witness. I took it off the hook, folded it once, and put it in the drawer beside the recipe box. The recipe box held index cards stained with tomato sauce, grease, and a little coffee at the edges. Inside was her handwriting for the soup special, the meatloaf, the pie crust, and the gravy that truck drivers swore fixed bad mornings. There was also a card I had never seen before. On one side, she had written the lemon pie recipe. On the other, in smaller writing, she had put my name. Teresa. Keep the room open. I stood there for a long time with the card in my hand. That was the first time I cried after the hearing. Not because I lost something. Because she had left me a job, not just a building. The next morning, I opened the diner at 4:45 like always. The coffee came up first. Then the grill. Then the lunch prep. Then the neon sign buzzing outside the window. I put Carmen's apron back on the hook. I put the recipe box under the register. I put the recorded deed in the office drawer with the other important papers. And when I flipped the open sign, I did not think about Archero anymore. I thought about the woman who knew he would sue and made sure he would lose if he did. The practical receipt was the recorded deed, the renewed license, and the order that stripped the $92,000 bequest away. The emotional receipt was the apron on the hook, the recipe card with my name on it, and the fact that the first coffee that morning tasted exactly like Carmen said it should. By lunch, 3 regulars had already come in and asked whether the pie special was still the same. It was. The sign was on, the grill was hot, and nobody was waiting for Archero to tell them what was open. That felt like the cleanest kind of victory. That was my story. My grandmother did not need to raise her voice. She left the paper in the right places,